The last KrakCast news of July before we head into August. By the way, it's a good time to make an announcement. We are taking most of the month of August off. And so we have some episodes in the can. That's what the pros say, in the can. That we're going to post in August, but there will be no KrakCast news for the whole month of August, which is okay because in our experience, nothing really happens in August, right? I mean,
and I think just because you said that, there will be a huge event like the 7th of August.
There's going to be tons of stuff to talk about, but
all traces of COVID will miraculously vanish worldwide.
Huge events.
The flash of light in Warsaw will disappear.
So, no news in August, but there will be weekly episodes on other topics. So keep an eye out for that. But yeah, this is our last news until we come back in September. We got to start this week. How could we not start with Cop Car Guy? We're calling him. Internet sensation, internet hero. If you missed this, I don't know how you missed it, but all over social media this week. A few days ago on the 21st, what was that?
Wednesday.
Tuesday or Wednesday, a couple of days ago anyway. This guy walking down Lubitsch Street past Białe Dom, the White House, which is a small police station there, if you don't know. About 5:30 in the morning, he's walking right past the police station. Of course, there are police cars parked outside. This guy apparently blasted out of his mind, probably coming home from a bar or something. He decides to stop. And this is all on video, by the way, captured on a camera right in front of the police station. He stops, climbs on top of a police car, jumps up and down, then sits down like a lotus position, starts to meditate or something. I don't know. And that's where the video stops. We learn later from the media accounts that the cops finally came outside. God knows how long it took them to notice.
I mean, they probably didn't want to notice. It's like, oh, God, this is not worth it.
How can they not hear this? This is like literally right outside the window where they sit.
Jumping up and down the roof like a trampoline.
We'll post a link to the video under on Facebook under the post for
There's a moment even where he's like jumping up and down, looking left and right, like, what? Nobody's coming. Yeah. He's got his arms stretched out.
Where are you people?
Like,
exactly. But here's the punchline. The guy's facing theoretically up to 5 years imprisonment. 5 years for this. Now, I hope even in Poland with the crazy judicial system that we have here that this is not really going to happen. But, people who commit like serious crimes that involve, physical violence don't get 5 years. Mike, what do you think? A hero or idiot?
Idiot. It's a hilarious video. All that's fantastic. We got our YouTube moment. But yeah, that's even if it was on a cop car, just doing that. Basically, what he's being charged with, amongst other things, is damaging public property. And of course, there was some aggression as well when the police finally did come out to arrest him or to apprehend him.
He did look like the kind of gentleman who would not come quietly.
Well, yeah, it's like he started off pretty not quietly.
How blasted out of your mind do you have to be to walk past a cop car and say, you know what? Instead of going home and sleeping this off, let me do one more thing before I go home.
I mean, it's just like one step just before twerking on it or something like that.
I'm trying to imagine you twerking on a police car.
I would rather not imagine me twerking to anything.
Well, anyway, like I said, if you missed a video, somehow we'll post it on our Facebook page right under the posting for this news episode. So check it out. We'll keep an eye on this. I'm sure that the media is going to keep us posted about developments in this case. 5 years for jumping up and down on a cop car. Oh my God!
The lower end is 3 months, and it's probably the most.
I don't think he's an idiot. I don't think he's a hero either. Somewhere in between. I mean, he's kind of living out the fantasy that a lot of us have. I don't think we necessarily have a fantasy about jumping on a cop car, but doing the stupid shit you wish you could just do and get away with. He happened to do it right in front of a camera. But he didn't want to get away from it.
He was sitting there and waiting, literally.
He was waiting, yeah.
It was more like suicide by cop, but without the gun. It's just like he wanted to get caught.
Isn't there a new Jackass movie just out or coming out?
This is that's a good point. This is a Jackass move, but done like with I don't give a shit attitude. I mean, it's really that's why I give him points. It's impressive from that angle. He's like, you know what? I don't care. I know the cops are right inside that door. They're probably going to see me after 3 seconds. Turned out to be like 3 minutes, but he did it anyway.
I'm pretty sure they saw him earlier. They're just like, no, we don't want.
No, we're not going anywhere near that.
5:30 in the morning.
Finish the donut. Let's move on to a story, Mike, about Polish Olympic team. Of course, the Olympics got started this week in Tokyo. And this is the story, Mike. When I said this to you on our private chat, I said, this is how Polish jokes get started. That's what I thought of when I saw this headline. It involves some athletes, swimmers specifically, who got a rude surprise when they landed in Tokyo.
Yeah, they found out that, they were technically part of the Polish Olympic team, but then they were told, actually, no, you're not. You have to go back. And what the Polish Swimming Association, or however you would like to translate that, explains is like that there was a miscommunication when it comes to how many swimmers could actually be sent to Tokyo for the Olympics, and they thought it was 23. Turns out it was only 17, so 6 had to fly back. The swimmers are suing the swimming association, Polish Swimming Association, and they want the president, the chairman, to step down. But he's saying, like, well, it's not his fault. He was in communication with the Polish Olympic Committee and the International Federation of Swimmers, and they're saying that there was a misunderstanding of the rules that show how many people can actually go. He also says that they sent out the list of people they wanted to send to Tokyo a month ago, and they never got a response saying, like, no, you can't send that many people. So it is kind of weird. And now these athletes are suing the Swimming Association, saying, like, we want compensation for the amount of money that we spent training for this, for the fact that, now we won't get any endorsements. There's no chance of us winning a medal, and a medal,
Yeah, as a swimmer, you get your shot like every 4 years, basically. This is their only opportunity to make it big, right?
It's not like another sport where, you can earn on a regular basis, like the example they gave are tennis players, which, they have all the Grand Slams, but you can basically be playing tennis matches year-round and earning a living wage.
And by the way, before you start making jokes about the earning potential of a swimmer, I would remind you of the case of a Polish swimmer named Otylia Jędrzejczyk, I think her name was, and I think she competed, I want to say 12 years ago, whatever Olympics those were. Anyway, she was very successful, and she had a huge, if not really long-lived career as an endorser. She was all over the television and, Polish media endorsing this and that. Not quite Robert Lewandowski levels, but certainly, she made a lot of money on the back of her success at the Olympics. So it is possible.
Oh, and killing her brother, that's another thing.
What?
Yes, she killed her brother. Car accident. One of the things she got is
is kill the right word?
She was going like 200 kilometers in a car not on a freeway, and an accident happened, and her younger brother died.
Okay, this is obviously before her endorsement career.
After. This was during her endorsement career. It kind of died down, then her endorsement career came back.
Died is not the right word there either, but wow. Okay, I did not know that. Okay, and I got some homework to do when I get home to look.
That was like the main thing about her.
Update my knowledge of Otylia Jędrzejczyk.
By the way, Robert Lewandowski is a footballer.
Yeah,
same difference.
Okay, anyway.
Athlete. Yes, the Polish jokes. The funny thing is, I listen to a lot of talk radio out of the U.S., especially Chicago, where I lived for a while. And of course, this came up as a Polish joke, and the radio,
like circus clown music in the background.
This is Chicago, so a radio announcer is like, "This is probably going to ruin my career," but this is like a typical Polish joke. And
it is.
And then he mentioned a bunch of Polish jokes that I actually hadn't heard for a while. But most Polish jokes, the weird thing about them is they're just jokes that you can put in any nationality or group. It's like quite interchangeable. Like the one he said that I actually kind of liked was. A 747 freighter crashed in a Polish cemetery. The authorities are investigating right now. So far, they've uncovered more than 2,000 bodies.
I like that one. Very good. Were we talking about swimmers a minute ago? I think we were. Yeah. But anyway, so they had to come home. And now, to our knowledge, this problem is limited just to the swim team, right? No other athletes have the similar situation?
So, that just makes the Swimming Association, which is blaming the Polish Olympic Committee and the International Swimmers Federation.
Your fault. No, it's your fault. No, it's your fault.
How is it that everybody else figured this out and you guys didn't?
Idiots.
But yes, these athletes are suing, saying that, loss of potential income. And as we were saying, this is like the culmination of their career, and like the chances of them in 4 years or 3 now having another shot at this is limited.
They'll form a splinter organisation called the Popular Front for Swimmers of Poland, I guess.
Anybody interested in the Olympics, by the way? Are we excited about this?
Yeah, very, very.
Whatever.
No?
No.
Josh, that was sarcasm, I guess.
Yeah.
Normally I am, but I just... The time zone is weird for this. To watch anything live, how far ahead is Tokyo of us? Like 8 hours?
8 or 9 hours, along those lines, yeah.
And most of the events take place in the early morning hours. So live here is like middle of the night and early morning, I guess, right?
Yeah, I mean, usually if they're having a live episode, they try to have things happen in the early morning to midday there, so it's during, quote unquote, during the daytime here. But there's only so much they can do.
Well, awkward segue here. We're going to stay with a kind of swimming story, sort of, not really. How That was kind of.
I know where you're going with this.
Swimmers now, not so good.
Yeah, there's no nice way to introduce this.
From one set of failed swimmers.
This is this is one of those stories we talk about once a year. It's always at this time of the year because if you're not familiar with this topic, it's something you should know about. Drowning is a thing in Poland. The summertime heat comes and people hit the lakes and the streams and the rivers and places where they shouldn't swim, and they do things they shouldn't do while they're swimming, like drinking a lot and just acting in ways they shouldn't. And bad things happen. And over the last 3 weeks, there have been story after story after story about people drowning under various circumstances. There was a particularly tragic story about a 2-year-old kid who drowned in a lake near Warsaw because his parents were still passed out drunk from a party the night before. They weren't paying attention. They turned out to be Ukrainian, I think, if I'm not mistaken, visiting here. But anyway, a lot of the stories do involve alcohol. Others involve people maybe overestimating their swimming abilities, maybe not really appreciating how, what deep water really means, et cetera, et cetera. Mike, what's your theory? Why do Polish people seem to have this problem with drowning?
I think part of it has to do with the fact that there isn't really a swimming culture in Poland. And I mean, like I mentioned this before, I was raised in Australia. You spend 2/3 of the year by the beach or by the pool. And
you're listening,
in
and
the
yes,
water.
Mike did mention earlier he grew up in Chicago. It's complicated. It's
also
complicated.
a lake, lots of swimming going on there. But I was always by the water, always in the water from a young age. In Poland, unless you live by the sea or by a lake, you don't necessarily spend your summers by the water or swimming anywhere. So it's only in recent years has actually installing a pool in the garden become a thing, and only rich people do that because otherwise it's a waste of money because the weather here really isn't conducive to having a pool. So people when they do go swimming, it's something they do 4 or 5 times a year. They're there all day. They get heat stroke. They're drinking. They really don't know what their abilities are, and it's more likely to happen than in other cultures. I
agree. I think you're 100% right about the absence of a swimming culture here. People kind of don't really appreciate the risks involved, the dangers involved. Alcohol is often a factor, as you said. And on top of that, people will go swimming in places where they shouldn't. I've kind of noticed, I don't know what the name we can use for this phenomenon. There's no body of water that's too stupid to go swim. I mean, Polish people never say, you know what, I don't want to go swimming there. But they will. They'll go in any standing water. They will jump in it.
Or actually, the problem is it's not just standing. It's like rapids, and they'll go swimming in it.
Any body of water, let's call it. And there are some places where you shouldn't go because you can't see under the surface necessarily. Yeah, there are often accidents, tragic accidents involved with people diving into water that's not deep enough for diving. Happens all the time.
That's what's happened here. Krakow here, where that happens a lot. Exactly. They will jump into the water. That's an old rock quarry that was filled up with water, but it's still cracking and changing the positions of the stones and the rocks beneath the surface of the water. So it looks fine. You jump into it, you don't realize that the same place you've been jumping in for years, all of a sudden there's a rock there that wasn't there last summer, and you slam your head into it, you break your neck, and that happens several times a year, unfortunately. And I think there's also another thing we need to mention here is that when people do swim in Poland, they swim in fresh water. And there is a difference about the buoyancy of fresh water and salt water. It's a few percent, but it makes a difference. And even the Baltic is a body of water. It's a sea that has less buoyancy than if you were swimming in the Atlantic or the Pacific. And that can also add to the tragedy of the situation.
Yeah, I realize it's kind of insensitive to call it drowning season. But that's basically what it is. Happens every year in July and August. You see these news stories, and I think you're right. It's the absence of a swimming culture. Kids don't take lessons when they're young, and as adults, they just kind of overestimate their abilities.
Yeah, it's weird. I mean, actually, as a child growing up in England, I mean, it was. Everyone was strongly encouraged to learn to swim, and the whole safety aspect of swimming, like don't go swimming straight after eating, don't do this, like this really long, litany of
certain weather conditions and
yeah. Like, they have like on the beaches in Cornwall, there's flags and not coast guards, what they call them, Baywatch type people.
Pamela Anderson.
Everything in slow motion, yeah. I do remember, though, it's like one of the first times I was in a pool. I might have been 3 or 4 years old when we were in Australia, and I remember splashing around and having trouble there, and like somebody pulled me out. And I think within a week, my parents sent me to swimming classes. And I was going there almost, every week learning how to properly swim. And then going to the beach, it was like, if it was summer, if the weather was nice, and like here you go to a park, there you go to a beach and you swim in the water. It's just like a natural thing that you kind of picked up in that scenario.
Well, let's move on from sad news to something just weird. Let's put this in the weird category. Everybody's favorite topic, TVP. We haven't beat up on TVP in a while. We all know that TVP is a bit of a joke, especially when it comes to the news division, which is right out of North Korea, it seems sometimes. But we're going to laugh at them for different reasons this week. We learned that TVP, again, that's a state broadcaster, state-funded broadcaster, is planning to start a new channel. This will be like their 43rd channel or something like that, on top of other regional and other specialized channels. A new channel aimed at teens. In fact, the working name is TVP Teen. And,
in English.
Sorry?
In English.
In English. And the idea is to, I don't know if this is explicitly stated, Mike, or if this is kind of understood, kind of counterbalance the content that we get from, it's always American, Disney and Nickelodeon and things like that.
Nowadays Netflix as well, yeah.
And Netflix, yes. In other words, there's an ideological element behind this. It's not just the opportunity to provide something from a Polish content creator, but I think the people at TVP are not exactly happy with the dubbed content that Polish teenagers and younger, what do they call them, tweens, 11, 12 years old, are watching from American programs.
I can understand the sentiment, especially when we're talking about the whole like culture war issues, et cetera, et cetera. The problem is, like, first of all, this is taxpayer funded. It's bureaucrats and administrators who are going to decide what goes on the air. And the worst thing is, if they do create any content, it will stifle the natural growth of content that could naturally exist in competition to what we're getting from the West or from other ideological points of view. So it's going to make it look kind of stupid. If you say you don't like what's being brought to Poland from all these other places, then your only alternative will be the state-run media, which won't be a great choice either. It's like you'll be pigeonholed with them. It's like, well, no, I don't like the crap they're putting out either, but you won't have much of a choice.
You know what? Actually, I'm gonna kind of stay in the middle on this. I think it's a stupid move for the reasons that you just outlined. I mean, maybe the need, the demand is there, but TVP are not the people to do it. There must be somebody else.
They're going to prevent the natural growth.
There must be somebody else better suited to create better content. However,
possibly the independent TV channel owned by Discovery, the major American.
That's true. TV. Yeah. But at the same time, this is where I'm going to get myself in trouble. I have to say, as a parent who has kids who watch this programming from Disney and Nickelodeon and Netflix, I can confirm that there is plenty of reason to resent the American dominance of the airwaves. And let me make clear that you don't have to be some right-wing Bible church Jesus freak to think that there's something a little weird and amiss with the programming these days. And if you haven't seen it, you don't know what I'm talking about. And if you don't have kids, there's probably no reason for you to watch this stuff. But the programming that kids, I'm talking 8, 9, 10 years old, the programming they're watching today is unbelievable at times. I mean, the storylines, the characters, the language they use, the sexualization, the cynicism.
Clues. You ever seen that? Yeah.
This is not the innocent, childhood fare of so many years ago. It's very, very different. And I've more than once, I've kind of stopped what I was doing and, looked at the TV and asked, wait, what did they say? What are they talking about? How old are they again? It's unbelievable. And so, again, if you think I'm saying this because I'm just like a Jesus freak or something, no, it's not the case at all. But look at it for yourself and look into the messages.
Listeners, let me tell you this: Jesus gave up a long time ago.
Nickelodeon and Disney. I mean, it's depressing. But I get where the sentiment is coming from. I just wish there was another way to do it.
That's what basically I was trying to say. It's like I understand the sentiment. I understand why some people might be motivated to create this kind of content. I just don't think it's a good idea for the state to be doing it.
Just as a side note, have you noticed with all of the Pixar movies over the last, decade, and the Disney movies and the DreamWorks movies, they all start out with establishing the death of a parent or the divorce of a parents, and how some kid is in this depressing. Have you noticed that?
And that's going back all the way with Disney, like Bambi, for Christ's sakes.
Okay, well that's a little all right, a little bit different. But I mean, in terms of adult themes,
a white male with a gun.
That same idea dominates. I mean, even Nickelodeon and Disney stuff. I mean, it's just you can't get away from it.
Oh, to be fair, John. I mean, I remember. I mean, I was kind of an avid book reader as a kid, and it seemed that a necessary ingredient of children's fiction was having like an orphaned child or a child with only one parent, or sort of raised by like horrible guardians, or
maybe.
it just. I guess it's partly because it's like. It gives you a narrative framework to make something more. I mean, as a kid, it meant like, oh, I'm so lucky of them. They're orphans, or like when your parents have been giving you a hard time. But yeah,
and I know I'm talking in general terms here. I can't get more specific without starting real serious fights in the culture war. But I would just, again, for anybody who hasn't watched Nickelodeon in the last 20 years,
don't.
Have a look and compare it to what you remember from when you were a kid, and it's very, very different today. But TVP, I don't think so. Speaking of weird decisions from the Polish government and just things that make you say, what the hell are they talking about? We learned this week, Dr. Mike, that the Polish Minister of Education, now he's kind of suggesting his comments were taken out of context here, but he seemed to suggest that Polish universities have an obligation to service Polish students before foreign students. The context was a conversation about how many foreign students there were in Poland, and he kind of said something to the effect that this makes it hard for Polish students to get into their own universities, and he's opened up a big can of worms here. What's your take on this?
Well, this is a complicated issue. A few days ago, at the University of, I think it was in Poznań, Adama Mickiewicz University, there was a banner put out there, University for Polish University for Poles. A little bit of an awkward statement. But he kind of seemed to suggest that, yes, he understands the sentiment there, that, this is government-sponsored education for our citizens, and those are the target audience of our investments in that sense, and not necessarily foreigners. Plus, he also outlined the fact that the previous minister in charge of this, Gowin, had introduced these legislative changes that made it more easy for foreigners to study in Poland. And Czarnek basically said that, yes, we want to make Polish universities more international, more intermingled, but there's a maximum point that maybe we should allow that for. And he said it hasn't reached that yet, but one of the main things that were changed was that students, high school students, especially from the East, from Ukraine, their final exams were given like a certain weight in points so they could get into universities here in Poland. You have to also remember there are a lot of Ukrainians now in Poland. So their exams, their test results, their grades help them get into universities here. And that basically makes it more difficult for Poles to get into universities here. The thing is, even Czarnek said this, that 20 years ago, there were about 2 million students every year. Now it's only a little bit over 1 million. So we have all these empty positions to fill. So it's understandable that there will be proportionally more foreign students as well.
So wait, are we to understand that when the Polish education minister was talking about foreign students, he's talking about Ukrainians specifically? They're the overwhelming majority of all foreign students.
When it comes to foreign students, they're their largest proportion. But he also said, it's still more than 90% of students are Polish students. So it just happens that once in a while there might be a course, there might be a university, there might be some class where it's more than 10% are foreign students. It's more of a fluke of the system. He didn't really say that there's anything bad going on, but we might want to look into this and monitor it. There's also something else that he talked about was, and this is not undergraduate students, but graduate students, where for the longest period of time, there were no incentives for students or any scientists to publish their articles in Polish papers because there were no extra points given to them when they would apply for graduate positions or postgraduate positions in Polish universities. So they changed that. So now if you publish an article, it gives you points that makes it more easier to become a postgraduate student in a university here. That's one of the things they were also talking about.
Well, there's also actually, and I don't want to kind of derail this too much, but there's been a thing, because I know this from other work that I do, the National Science Centre, which is a kind of a big coordinating body for science in Poland, and also kind of liaises with various EU bodies and indeed around the world. And there's been a condition introduced recently that all work published should be published in open access format, which is, I mean, I don't know how much you know about the world of kind of academic magazines and academic journals and so forth. They tend to be very, very expensive, but some of them are prestigious. And it used to be the thing, oh, you get your paper published in Nature or Science, for example, then that, carries a great deal of clout. But there's been something of a fight back, because traditionally you had the likes of Robert Maxwell and Springer's and a few other big publishing houses who've made an absolute fortune from charging outrageous subscriptions for these academic journals. And I think the kickback is now to what they call these open access platforms. So, I mean, yes, the stuff is peer reviewed, but
free.
Yeah, it's free to read. I mean, sometimes you have to pay to have it published there, but I think the end point is freely publishable, freely available.
Speaking of fortune, Dr. Mike, isn't it a fact that to the extent that foreign students are here in whatever numbers, they're not here to create a more interesting, intellectually diverse, multicultural atmosphere for Polish students. They're here because they're a cash cow for Polish universities.
Yeah.
Well, that's you have to separate those two, because the issue they're talking about here are foreign students that are in Poland and applying for the same positions that regular residents in Poland are applying
not for dedicated programs for foreigners.
Exactly. Those dedicated programs for foreigners, the ones like, for instance, that I studied here in
isn't that the majority of all foreign students, the ones that are in programs just for them?
Actually, no. Those are just cash cows.
Okay, then we are talking about Ukrainians. Then we're talking about 99% Ukrainians.
The bulk of foreign students here that are taking part in the quote-unquote Polish universities are mainly Ukrainians. That's why this
not mainly, like almost exclusively.
Well, I imagine there's the odd Belarusian there as well.
Yeah, along those lines, exactly.
Yeah, well, Belarus and Ukraine probably make literally 95% of all those.
And then and this is where I also mentioned about the postgraduate and the graduate students are coming from foreign countries, because those courses will be, maybe even though they're open to everybody, they might be in English anyway.
Yeah. But was the implication that there are qualified, deserving Polish students who can't go to university because the spots were taken by Ukrainians?
I mean, this is where it started to get a little muddied, because they're already saying that there are fewer Polish students in general than there were 20 years ago. So, but the universities are still the same size, it's not growing larger, so they have more positions. That's part of it. But they were saying that, like, well, since for instance, we have these Ukrainians coming in and we're counting their grading system or their final exams on par with ours, that's a little not fair for a Polish student who's been in this system here for, 12 years, got the grades, it was government funded schools, and all of a sudden he's not getting it because we're counting the grades of some kid from the East as equal with his, and we don't know if they're equal or not.
No, I'm sympathetic to the sentiment, and yes, the Polish government is responsible for Polish people and providing the best standard of living for Polish people and providing the best value for the taxes they pay, and I totally understand that. I get that. But every time I hear the whatever for Poles, like you said earlier, in this university for Poles, what comes to my mind is the fact that I forgot the exact number, but it's somewhere between 20 and 25% of all the people on the entire planet who self-identify as Polish live outside of this country, right? And they live and go to school in any number of countries around the world and take up hospital spaces and school spaces and public services and whatnot. And so Poland should sometimes be a little more, less aggressive when it comes to kind of, nationalist sentiments about how this is here, so it's ours, because, Canada and the United States and Ireland and Sweden and the UK and Germany have provided, school places, among many other things, for Polish people for decades.
And exactly. And, there are so many universities, so many places they could go to. And it just seems like a handful of kids that didn't get into the university they wanted to. And they're blaming it on the fact that there was a Ukrainian or Belarusian student that, his grades were counted above the Polish student. So that's why he got in and got that position. But these are freak anomalies. We're not talking about a large scale situation here right now. So deal with it. Life is hard.
Let's talk about cocaine.
Sorry?
Let's talk about cocaine.
Yeah, life is hard. Let's talk about cocaine.
Or what is apparently, allegedly, but not really cocaine. We learned a couple of days ago from the local police here in Krakow that a guy was arrested for selling what he claimed was cocaine to drunk, gullible tourists for 400 zlotys per whatever the unit, little baggie or whatever. We learned that he was in fact selling Mike, I always have problems translating the Polish word dopalcze.
Dopalacze. Basically, the exact translation would be like afterburners. It just means, something that gives
gives a high,
an extra kick,
but it's not cocaine. Yeah.
Basically, any kind of like psychotropic drug, a bit of a stimulant. It's a very wide group of quote unquote artificial drugs, which were really popular 10 years ago when Polish law was such that yes, cocaine, heroin, whatever was illegal, but if you decide to sniff bleach and glue, that was
basically
quasi-legal.
Like a cheap homemade high. If you go through the stuff in your chemical drawer at home, and you can combine a few things, that kind of high, basically.
Exactly. And apparently this guy was claiming it was cocaine, but it was basically, he was a chemist. He put things together, added some lidocaine to it as well, made sure it was white, and was selling it as cocaine to drunk tourists.
Now, what I did not see is that how he got caught. I kind of find it hard to believe that a tourist would go to the police station and say, "Hi, I bought some cocaine, but it's really crap." So he must have sold to an undercover cop or something.
Apparently, they were after him for a while. That they realized that this was going on, and apparently he was wise to the fact that would it be a good idea to sell this stuff to regular clients? He would sit around the main square for the last couple of years, and 2019, I believe, is when they suggest that he started it. He would find like drunk tourists walking around. It's like, hey man, you want an extra hit here? It's like, I got something here for 400 zlotys. A foreign tourist who's drunk 2 a.m. It's like he's got cocaine for 400 zlotys. So we're talking like 80 pounds. It might sound like an enticing deal. Would sell it to him. The fact that it turns out to be nothing but baking soda and asbestos, you don't care. You're messed up anyway. And you're flying out the next day, so the chances.
And you can't go to the cops anyway, even if you do find out what really happened.
Well, they picked up on some details that this was happening, and they found him off on the Rynek near Florianska late last week, and they went to his apartment, which he was renting off of Florianska as well. Besides finding thousands of zlotys worth of these product prepackaged. He made a
fortune. He must have made a
fortune. They had, about 200,000 zlotys in cash, gold bars, et cetera, et cetera.
Gold bars, yeah. How about that?
But I can't help but think that I would think that there's a very strong likelihood that the reason the police were able to kind of identify him and track him and ultimately, I guess, entrap him or whatever, is probably from the presence of cameras, because what you do get from cameras in places like around the main square and on Florianska is, obviously you don't sit there and watch just for the hell of it all the time long, but it is possible, if there's a guy that is always appearing at around this time in the morning and he's standing there and he's kind of talking to a group of people, and then, the next night he's there talking to a different group of people, and maybe they disappear into a dark corner and then emerge again 5 minutes later. And it's like, well, you know what? Looks like this guy's up to something. And once you've clocked it once or twice, then you're going to be on the lookout for it. So you watch it over course of a few weeks and you think like, right, we're going down there and we're going to have a word.
Yeah, he was doing his business, so to speak, in the Rynek, and so I'm sure they've got his face on video lots and lots of times. Yeah. Plenty of evidence. He's in trouble. So if your cocaine high hasn't been as good as you wanted the last few weeks or months or years, now you know why.
Okay, so because I didn't bother to do any of the research on all of this, because I know you guys mostly do the heavy lifting here, but if he was selling something that was an intoxicant, just was a rather brutal and less refined nature than cocaine, then he's still selling drugs illegally. But if he was selling like powdered milk, for example, then what's his actual offence? It's an intent to defraud, isn't it?
If it's, I don't know, yeah. In America, people take lawn clippings and sell it as marijuana. But if you are presenting it as the drug, it's treated as selling drugs, even if it's not really the drug. Okay. And I suspect that in most countries, it is some kind of crime. It's some kind of, as you say, intent to defraud. Maybe it's treated as selling actual drugs, but it's not like a backdoor escape from drug charges if you get caught. No. He's in real trouble.
He was selling products that have a psychotropic effect.
Right, okay. Yeah.
So, it wasn't cocaine, so his customers were duped or doped, but the product he was selling in of itself was illegal as well.
Yeah.
Last item on our list for today. This is an interesting story. I'm curious to see what your take on this is, guys. We learned this week that representatives from PO, the main opposition party in Parliament, they've submitted a proposal to outlaw fireworks. And not just because they're a pain in the ass and people use them, get on my fucking nerves because they use them for 5 hours on New Year's Eve. No, specifically they mentioned that they want to ban fireworks because of the harm they do to animals. Mm-hmm. Now, this is a thing. I can remember, I don't know, handful 5-6 years ago, suddenly this became a thing on social media. Oh, please think about the animals, and it quickly kind of gained momentum.
It's actually,
wasn't always a thing.
This always slightly puzzled me because being English and growing up in a country where the long-standing tradition of fireworks is on November the 5th, bonfire night. And I always, back when there was responsible children's TV programs, which were all about behavior. I'm looking at you, Blue Peter. And, make sure that your dogs are locked inside and, the loud noises will scare them. And, lots of animals and pets are really, really unhappy about all of this, yada, 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 yada. And then when I moved here, and something that very early on became apparent is that people in Krakow like dogs, like lots and lots of people have dogs. There are dogs everywhere. And also I learned very, very quickly that they really like fireworks and letting them off all the time. And I was thinking, well, how can a city full of dog lovers also be, and like their firework displays here are not like a few little clicks and pops. I mean,
you're talking like the official, like organized city sponsored shows, or like the ones your neighbors put on?
Well, both, I guess. I mean, but some of the official ones, like they have like for Yankee or whatever. I mean, it's like Armageddon.
Yeah, I love fireworks. I mean, one of the proponents of this legislation are saying is like there are so many other alternatives, like laser shows or something like that. It's like screw that. I want the boom. I want to feel it in my gut. I love the smell of sulfur in the morning.
Exactly.
And the funny thing is, I remember being a kid, and one of my friends had a dog, and we used to throw on fireworks. And the thing was to hold the dog back from going after the firework. A lot of people don't realize that dogs kind of react to the way their owner reacts. So if the owner is calm and enjoying something, then the pet will generally learn to react that way as well. I mean, I'm not suggesting torture and torment your pets and animals, but another side, I'm like, they're animals, and fireworks are fun. Deal with it. For me, it's like the pleasure of a human is 10 times more valuable than the momentary suffering of an animal. We have to remember that we're not on equal terms with animals. If you don't agree with that, shoot yourself right now. And I mean that quite seriously because, it's like, there has to be a little speciesism here right now.
All right, I'm going to go the other way, Mike. I really don't like fireworks. I don't mind like the official, big show, the ones put on by the city or by Disney World or whatever. But the ones that your neighbors, they drive me insane. If it was up to me, fireworks would be legal for about 2 minutes on either side of New Year's Eve at midnight.
But they're only legal on New Year's Eve and the first day of the year in Poland. And they're on public area. Okay, on private, if you're in a private area far away from everybody, they're illegal.
The reason is that people show every year that they cannot use them responsibly. They just can't. And I feel weird saying this because normally I would be for the, let's blow stuff up and make noise.
Second Amendment rights.
Second Amendment, yeah. I'm all for it. But for some reason, fireworks just get on my nerves. But what about specifically, Josh, what about the idea that the PO wants to ban them not because of, the blown off fingers and the visits to the emergency room and just the public noise, but because animal cruelty.
I think that's very interesting because, of course, I think it's a major shift in, I think, general public perception of things over many decades, and actually whether it's vegetarianism or more extreme dietary things or not wearing leather, there has been this kind of growing understanding of we should care for the rights of animals. I mean, I'm somewhat with Mike in this, in that I don't like the idea of unnecessary cruelty, but we certainly shouldn't be indulging them in the way that we indulge humans.
How about the fact that the dog owner gets veto power over everybody else? Let's say theoretically there's a block of apartments, there's 50 apartments, one person has a dog. I know in the real world more than 1 out of 50 would have a dog, but that one person, because of that one dog, nobody can set off fireworks?
Well, that's actually one of those theories about how certain changes in society happen now, is where you have the small minority basically imposing on others their thoughts. This is like you have a family, 5 people, parents, 3 kids, and one of the kids decides to become a vegetarian. And then the parents preparing meals for the family. It's like, well, we could either make 2 meals or just make all our meals vegetarian. And all of a sudden you have 5 people vegetarian because one person decided to become it. And then that family goes to a barbecue. And the people preparing the barbecue are basically saying like, well, we could make, a bunch of meat for everybody and then something vegetarian for them.
for the freaks over there.
Or we could just make it easier for all of us and make just only.
Come on. I mean, like,
and that's for me. That's the same dog argument. It's like, well, those people have a dog, so the rest of us will give up on, go along to live. I mean, go along to get along. Exactly, a mentality. Which
I mean, I've been going to barbecues for years in the UK, and there's the sort of courgette grill, and then there's the real one. It's sort of like,
just give them as an example of how.
No, you're absolutely right, and I mean.
The rest, which kind of, they don't agree with it, but they want to be nice, so they go along with it. And I think this is one of those examples when most people, if you really ask them about it, would not care or would prefer the fireworks, but they don't present that view in the public mind.
And part of the long march through the institutions, isn't it?
Exactly.
I think instead of focusing on this, they should devote their legislative power to passing laws that people really want. Like, for example, in my case, the death penalty for anybody who stands on the balcony after 10 p.m. and talks loud.
This is why Dave isn't with us anymore. No, but the funny thing is,
because we shot him.
Fireworks, yes.
No, can I just bitch about the balcony thing? I mean, it drives me insane. To people who, especially when they have parties and go on the balcony. Okay, I get it, certain time, but up to a certain hour, it's okay. You have to tolerate it, but. Like, you think you live alone in this building? I mean, it's talking and talking. Of course, they get louder and louder as the night goes on and the beers get opened. That's what gets on my nerves 10 times more than fireworks.
I completely agree with that. I mean, I live in a building with a lot of Airbnbs, and they'll, I'll go down there at 2 a.m. on a Friday. It's like, okay, fine, I understand. A little quieter. They'll turn down the noise, then it goes back up. They'll open up the windows on the street, and noise goes everywhere. But I'm the kind of person that, I'll give them a warning once, and I call the cops.
What does your warning sound like? I'm curious.
Just I knock on the door. It's like, hey guys, if you're in Krakow, go somewhere. Oh. What's the point of renting an apartment and then partying in it when you're in a party town? I mean, okay, COVID kind of skewed that, but generally speaking. But going back to PO or KO, whatever they're called right now, introducing this legislation, It's like, aren't there more important issues that we should be debating or talking about?
No.
Basically,
we've
society is
everything
almost perfect. We just tweak these last few things, and it's utopia.
I know we're going to wrap this up. I did want to, and I've already said this is our last story, but I did want to mention one more thing quickly. We didn't dive into this too much, but I can't let this go. There was a traffic accident at the top of Karmelitska Street here in Krakow this week, right on the inside part of Aleja, right where Karmelitska turns into Królewska, Plac Invalidów, et cetera, et cetera. And the accident involved a tram and a bus. And it looks like the tram...
It's a timetabling error.
It looked like the tram had the green light, the right-of-way, and it looks like the bus ran a red light. Now, what kind of confidence does this give you in the drivers of public transport when a bus collides pretty forcefully, it seems from the photos, with a tram?
Let's put it this way, it's all of a sudden working from home seems like a much better option anyway.
Isn't that the junction where, do you remember we discussed this a while ago now, that they were talking about introducing the famous yellow box junctions like they have in the UK.
That's right, yeah.
So, because, I mean, it's probably a little better now because apart from buses and taxis, cars can't go down Karmelitska, so you have to turn
How does the yellow box work again? I forgot what it's all
you can't enter it until the point where you expect to leave it is clear. Oh. You have to be able to go all the way across to where...
There's no stopping. The thing is, technically, the Polish law, just like in other countries, suggests that anyway.
Well, that's right. The genius of the yellow box is that it's like they're in yellow and road colour for you.
Did they ever implement that here?
I don't think they did. No, but they should do, because it's actually, it is a very, very good system. And it's very clear, for example, if there's actually a policeman standing around who's not busy nicking pedestrians. The lights change, the car's got its rear quarters sticking into the yellow box. It's like, yeah, you're nicked.
But it looks like this accident happened in the only one area where it could have happened, because generally the intersection...
kind of T-boned the bus, didn't it?
The Plac Invalidów, there's the viewing angles from most approaches are pretty good.
The bus T-boned the tram.
But this was basically... the tram was coming on Karmelitska, so heading out west, with the bus coming in from the north. And that's like the only intersection where the vehicles don't necessarily see each other until more or less the last moment. So it looks like the bus leaving the bus stop saw the light was turning, orange and red, and decided to rev the engine and go, while the tram, which generally has right of way, was going already. So the bus was like halfway through and the tram hit it, and they didn't see each other until the moment they already had enough momentum that there wasn't any stopping.
You had another problem of intersectionality.
I was also thinking about the fact that had this happened somewhere in America, like everybody who was like kind of injured on the bus would be a multimillionaire right now. Whereas here, everybody probably got the cop probably said, "Hey, you okay? All right, walk it off. Okay, you're good. Go home. Bye."
You're bleeding internally. Well, it's still inside you. That's where it's supposed to be. Keep going.
Don't make a mess on the paper.
Can you prove that this accident caused it? No, I didn't think so. Okay, bye. Okay, let's bring things to a close here. That covers it for this week's news. As I said, it's the last news of the month as well, so we'll be back first week in September to start again. So thanks, everybody. Enjoy your August. Again, we'll be posting weekly episodes on other topics, and we'll see you next time on the news.